Hi, everybody. You are listening to the Procure Smarter podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sharon Cook, and today we are going to talk to Deirdre Tshien. She is an Aussie who now lives in New York City and is loving it. She still runs her business remotely in Sydney, and she helps entrepreneurs capture their audience's attention and emotionally connect to their brand. So stay tuned for that. I would also like to take this moment to introduce you to ProcureSmart Purchasing Agency. We are a boutique purchasing agency specializing in FF&E for new builds, renovations, and conversions. If you have a project coming up and you need purchasing services, we would love if you would give us a try. Reach out to us. We will offer a free preliminary budget. That's right, a free preliminary budget. And we offer great customer service. You will love working with us. Trust me when I say that. All right, everybody, stay tuned. We are going to talk to Deirdre Tshien. Hi, everybody. We're back, and we are with Deirdre Tshien, and she is an Aussie living in New York City. Hi, Deirdre. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me on, Sharon.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, we have so much to talk about, but before we get started, I got to hear your journey. I want to know how you went from Australia to New York and some of the things that you're still doing right now.
Yeah, gosh, wow. Where do I even start? Okay, so I'm going to try to give you the short version and definitely stop me if you want me to delve into certain bits of it. But
okay.
So I started in corporate, like a lot of other entrepreneurs who maybe don't know what they were meant to be doing. And I actually was working for an investment bank in Sydney, one of the biggest in Australia. And I think I knew early on that corporate and climbing the corporate ladder probably wasn't going to be for me. I think a lot of us do. And for me, the moment came when I was really fortunate because I was put in this really large project. It had visibility all the way up to the CEO, and I was in these rooms with really senior people, which was great. But what that exposed me to was kind of, when they talk about the politics in corporate, it was like right in front of my eyes.
Yes.
And I was like, oh man, I do not want to become this other person in order to survive and make it in corporate. So I kind of knew that wasn't going to be the path for me, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I had really no talents to speak of, no skills. Like some people, are just, they're just fortunate because they know they've just been given this really great skill and talent. And they're like, yep, this is what I'm going to be doing. And they know, and I had none of that. So and at the same time, around about the time when I was having these moments of like, oh, what am I going to do? My quarter life crisis. My then boyfriend, now husband, he was actually studying medicine at the time and was miserable. He really wasn't enjoying it. And we had just moved out together. So it was kind of our first foray into adulting,
right.
like for ourselves and doing all those things.
Paying some bills.
Yeah, exactly. And he actually really enjoyed cooking and specifically actually baking. And I love my desserts. So he used to spend a lot of time perfecting, my favorite desserts for me. And out of that, we were like, maybe this is something that we can explore. His love of baking, my love of just being curious. I'm just curious. And I'm just like, can we make a business like this work? So we actually opened our own dessert bar in Sydney.
And so it's called
the Choc Pot.
Nice.
And it was actually basically named after my favorite dessert. So my all-time favorite dessert is always a chocolate molten lava cake. Now the way that Ash, my husband, makes it is actually still in a pot. So when you sort of break through the crispy chocolate, it's just molten chocolate inside. So that's why we called it the Choc Pot. And yeah, that was like almost a decade ago. And I can tell you, like, I would highly not recommend anyone go into hospitality or brick and mortar store as their first business. It is hard. We didn't have a background at all in hospitality. We were just like, these naive young upstarters, like, yeah, we will figure it out. We're smart enough. And it was hard because a lot of things that we didn't realize, you have to sign up to a lease. We at that time signed up to a 3-year lease, and leases are not easy to get out of. You have to spend a lot of money to fit out the place. So we were already in debt, like mine in debt before we even opened. And then from day one, you're having to pay supplies and wages and like it was a struggle, like honestly. When I look back now, I'm like, I'm glad we went through that, because in a way we were forced to make it work. Like we had a rent agreement in place. We had like all of these things. And unlike now, when you can just sort of spin up, online businesses that are relatively easy to unwind, we didn't really have that luxury.
Right.
So it forced us to be innovative. It forced us to really focus on, what mattered, which ultimately always comes down to marketing and sales, because you need to get people in the door. You need people to know about you, because don't do what we did, which is hoping that, once you build it, they will come, because that's not. So fast forward a few years, we did end up making it work to the point where we grew that to 5 locations.
Wow.
And in the meantime as well, we opened up a burger restaurant alongside that. So we have 2 of those locations. And then we found out, so probably, this was probably 4-ish years ago, we found out that our store manager of our busiest store that was located in the city, and I'll tell you the story, like I remember it was because it was the middle of the night. I think it was something like 2 a.m. And I kind of like startled awake and realized that Ash wasn't in bed with me. He was still out at our dining table, out on his computer. And I'm like, so I kind of stumble out and I'm like, what are you doing? It's really late. You should come to bed. And I just remember like the look on his face was just, it was like ashen. And he was like looking at the computer screen, just, and I was like, what's going on? And he was like, don't worry, go to bed. I'll talk to you in the morning. And I'm like, well,
you can't tell me.
I'm not going to be able to go to sleep now. Yeah. So yeah, he had just gotten off the phone with another team member in our city store. And she was like, look, I don't know how it's being done. I don't know what's happening, but I think what's happening is that this person, our store manager, is stealing. Wow. And so as Ash was going through, and no one could figure out how it was being done. But finally Ash found sort of I think he started thinking about it, and he found the place in our point of sale where these voided transactions were going through. And it was racking up to the point, I mean, it took us almost a full week to go through all of the records and tally it up. And it was like, excuse me, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
that had been stolen. And it's kind of like, there's nothing like this moment when it's like a big betrayal. And whether that's like an employee-employer relationship or a spousal relate, or like a friendship, any kind of betrayal that happens, I think just forces you to stop and take stock of, what's been happening. And I think for us, that was that moment of, is this where we want to be? Is this the path that we want to be now at this point in our life? We kind of been, I knew that I wanted to get out of corporate, escape that hamster wheel, but in a way we kind of built another hamster wheel, and we were just doing and doing and doing. And it was like, is this actually what we want to be doing? And, for me, I'd always wanted to live and work overseas. And so in a way, we were just like, you know what, like, F it, dude, let's just do it. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but we're just going to make it happen. And at that same time, I was actually working on another business idea with another co-founder that I'd met in corporate. Her name's Bonner, and we were actually working on this fashion technology idea. And I was kind of telling her about, this decision that we've made. And I was like, do you just want to come to New York too? I mean, what better place than the intersection for the intersection of fashion technology than a place like New York? And so she was like, okay, sure, why not? So, I kind of like came to New York with my husband, my cat, and my co-founder in tow. And yes, that's kind of, to answer your question, that was kind of the move for us from Sydney, Australia, all the way to the other side of the world in New York. That was kind of the lead up, the journey to that.
So it's a great story, but so you've said a couple of things. One, it's a great story. It's sad that what precipitated it was a betrayal by a trusted employee. But like all things like that, there is a lot to be learned, you know?
Yeah.
And the second thing that you said that it just really captured me was that you were on one hamster treadmill and you kind of inadvertently jumped to a second one. And so you had to reevaluate again.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think, I'm always really grateful for the journey. Like I'm sometimes when we're on the journey, like in it right now, we look at our day to day and we're like, oh my gosh, like, this is a struggle, especially when you're in entrepreneurship, right? It's like every day feels like you're trying to like put yourself through mud. Exactly.
Yeah.
And definitely that time, because, I can tell you, like when we're talking hundreds of $1,000s, like that store, it was clearly performing incredibly well, but there was a time when we were like, we didn't know what was going on. And he would be showing us videos of how quiet the center was and all of that. And we, because obviously he was sort of trying to hide what he was doing. And so he was making up all these, but that moment, it was incredibly hard. I can tell you, like sleepless nights. I developed migraines. It was a really, really terrible time, but it did force us to be innovative. Like there was, to your point, there was a lot of good that kind of came out of that as well, in terms of like, even not only from an external objective perspective of like, we were able to increase sales again, but also because when you can go through something like that, where you've gone through this really tough time and still make it work, it just reinforces the fact that we are capable and we can do it. It's just, yeah.
So let's talk about, okay, you're in New York now. You've come to New York to start this fashion technology piece. But that kind of morphs again, doesn't it? Like you don't stand still, you kind of morph again. And now you're doing something I think is super fascinating, which is why I reached out to you. So tell me what you're doing now.
Yeah, so Capsho, it's a software that honestly helps entrepreneurs take the crappiness out of content creation. So what it does is, because we are big believers in storytelling, and for numerous reasons, but the most important is because stories are what connects us. And ultimately that's what business and marketing sales is. It's all about connection, because if you can't connect with your ideal customer, your ideal client, how are they ever going to want to give you money?
Right.
And so that was our starting point, was, we know that the future of content, and even not even the future, but even the now of content, is all about storytelling. But we also know how hard that is. I mean, it was a struggle for me, struggle for my clients. And so we came up with a way to, and Capsho is the software, the end result of that, which is you feed it your stories and it will actually create a whole bank of short form content and short form captions and emails for you. So that's kind of what Capsho does, which is.
So I gotta know, how did you get there? How did you know that this was a need?
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go. If you don't mind, I'll take
it back. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, we hit New York and we were like super excited to get this thing going, and but we needed to talk to our ideal customers and see if this was a need. And our hypothesis was that our customers for this fashion technology idea was going to be either college students or young professionals. So we actually hit Columbia campus, NYU campus, Wall Street. We were just going up to women and asking them about, this problem that we hypothesized that people had. And through that journey, we realized that while it was a problem, it wasn't a big enough one that people would be willing to change their habits for immediately. Like, we just didn't have the runway to be able to convince someone to change their habits in that way. So we were like, we actually deliberately failed that idea. But what happened was that at the same time, we were also talking to brands and boutiques, because it needed to have both sides of the marketplace. And time again, the thing that they always were like, their number one problem and what they needed solving was acquisition. And no surprise, again, as entrepreneurs, we all know acquisition is, the biggest thing for any of our businesses to survive. And So we actually kind of fell into, because when we circled back with them, we were like, okay, well, we've decided not to go down this path, but what we can do is we can help you with the acquisition piece a little bit more traditionally. So through ads and through social media and just, we asked them to do a strategy or implement a strategy called the live conversion method. So they would actually show up live, kind of like live trunk shows online. And that went really, really well. But again, for us, it was like, do we want to be scaling an agency business? Is this really where our hearts are? And and this is why the journey is like, I'm never, you can probably hear throughout my whole story is that I'm never one of those people who are like, yes, this is the thing. I'm always like, I'm just going to try it.
Yeah.
And then at some point I'll probably get a feeling that it's either right or it's wrong. I got that feeling again where I was like, I think we need to be serving people, from a scaling perspective. So from a business perspective, agency doesn't make sense for how we want to scale. And B, we want to be working with people sort of just starting and really needing that help, because I remember how lonely it was when I was just starting. And so we went into coaching, and we were specifically coaching e-commerce businesses, because that was, a lot of our background and what we were doing. And then through that process was when I was speaking to clients, and we were struggling through our own, the sucker of content creation. You know how important it is to get visibility and get credibility, but sometimes you're like, why am I spending all these hours doing this when it feels like you're just shouting into this echo chamber? Like, is there anyone even caring that I post? Like,
Yes.
But then you feel guilt if you don't post, right? Like, this is the thing. So, we, from that whole journey, I was like, this is what we need to be solving. And then came the question, and then funnily enough, end of last year. So we actually only launched Capsho end of last year, but just before that, a few months before that, I was at an event, and Tony Robbins was a guest speaker at that event. And I was, we were still doing the e-commerce coaching, but I just, again, I wasn't feeling, something just wasn't sitting right with me. I didn't really know what it was. But it was something that Tony said, because he was talking about how to find fulfillment and happiness. And he literally just said the first thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is what it is. Because he was talking about the fact that a lot of us focus on what's missing rather than what we have. And while I loved working with my clients, I think I was always on this, rampage of like, I felt like there were just so many gaps in me, and I was like, again, on this, I just needed to be more and consume more and learn more and teach more and stuff in order to feel like I was actually who I thought I needed to be. I don't know. It was really,
no, it makes sense.
Yeah. And so, but in that moment when he said that, I was like, something I do have is, and people get surprised, but I'm actually a massive introvert. And it's plagued me my whole life. Like, I didn't want to promote myself. I didn't want to even promote my first business because of how introverted I am. I never spoke up in, corporate meetings. I never raised my hand in classes, like none of that. But I've still been able to find success, success means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But for me, in my journey and how I've been able to grow, I call that success. And so that's something that I have. Something I have is I'm this massive introvert who has still been able to break through a lot of my own barriers and a lot of things that were holding me back to find success in different areas of my life. And that's something that I can share. And so when I couple I know that storytelling is what we need, is the future and where we need to be heading with content creation. And I know that sometimes what we struggle with is the fact that we don't think we have stories to share. We don't think that we're remarkable in any way. When I came to that realization that actually I'm remarkable in my own way, we all are. And that's what led me on this path of, this is what I'm meant to be doing right now, which is to help entrepreneurs find that remarkability in themselves and then share it with their audience in a way that doesn't suck. That doesn't suck their energy and time.
So I would like to say, I think one of the things that makes a great successful person is what you do. You pivot. You're not afraid to look at it, to ask yourself, is this right for me right now? And change. And a lot of times people will be like, well, if I quit my job, if I do this, they get bogged down in the what ifs and the fear, and they stay stagnant. And I love about your story that you're like, no, let's change. Okay, let's change again. Okay, let's change again until you find what makes you happy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I do sometimes worry because I'm like, is this just, I don't know, some kind of shiny object syndrome thing? But thank you for saying that. That's really, really kind.
All right. So you had a comment on one of your posts that you talk about growing your tribe and how to find your tribe and grow it. And I would like you to talk about that because as a small business owner, as a woman, sometimes in my 50s, it is hard to find your tribe because we're so busy and we're all on that wheel, So what advice do you give?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll kind of split it up. So one is like finding a tribe, and then the second is the busyness bit, which I'll also talk to. So the first bit in terms of finding a tribe is, and by the way, this is like, I've been through it all. So everything I say is like no judgment, right? But like sometimes we start a business and we're like, yeah, we know who we're talking to. They kind of look like we intuitively, and especially as women, because we're such intuitive beings, like we're like, yeah, we know who our target person is. What I get all my clients to do, and what I had to do was, because I used to spend I was wasting thousands on ads because I didn't actually know who my person was. I feel like I thought I did, but did I really? Until I made myself do what I call active organic marketing, which is actually like, if you, let's say you're on Instagram and you were to find an example of someone who was your ideal client, what would you search? Where would you go? Like literally, if you were to do it, you pick up your phone and go like, what would I search in like, maybe what hashtag would I use? What account would I like? What followers would I be looking at? Like, who is that actual person? So and then it wasn't until I got into that discipline of going like, oh gosh, yeah, what would I search? Like,
yeah,
what would, until when I was like, oh, okay, this is why I'm not actually connecting with directly with that person, because I really don't know. I know what I want to talk about and I know what I want my thing to be, but do I really know if that person's connecting with it? No, because I didn't get into the discipline of actually like, who is the specific people that if you were to reach out to them, if you were to DM them and have them be really excited about what you do, who would they be?
right.
So that's something, in terms of like finding your tribe. I mean, everyone talks about know your customer avatar, know your ideal client, and that's really easy to say, but it's like, until you do it in that way, it's really hard to actually say, yep, I know who my ideal client is. Now, the busyness bit is a big one, big one, because part of our strategy is that we do actually do a lot of active organic marketing, but that takes time. And I don't know about you, but I'm like,
oh yeah,
I don't want to be doing that. So we've actually got this whole system where we have a VA do it all for us. Really cost effective, and to the point where I only spend 2 hours a week on social media activities.
wow,
like that's it, because we have been able to completely systemize and delegate it all out to our VA. And that's actually something that, Capsho is a software, but we actually have a coaching program alongside that we actually help people do that as well. We help them find recruiter VA if they don't have one. If they do, awesome, they come into the program as well, and we help set them up to not only create all the content, do all the research, do all the all of the crappy stuff that you don't want to do, but also to actually get leads for you, generate leads.
And for anybody of a little bit of an older generation who's figuring this out, a VA is a virtual assistant, right?
Yes. Sorry.
Right. No, I just want to make sure everybody understands.
Yeah.
It is something that I have just recently started to explore, and so I knew the VA meant it, but I there might be some of us out there who don't.
Yeah. So 100%. And, we work with Filipino VAs who, they've been amazing. The ones that we've worked with, super, super cost effective. So it's almost like, regardless of where you are in your business journey, like it's actually, I would highly recommend, I wish I had done it sooner, because there's always something that holds us back, because it's like, well, how do I know if I'm going to be earning enough? How do I know if I have enough revenue? I'm not at that stage where I need, you should start building a team. I can tell you that like this one thing, like building that team, like even getting my first VA was it completely lifted me out of the weeds that I could be creative. And creative means different things to different people. Like for me, I could be more creative or focus on what I needed to, which is sales.
Right.
I could be creative about thinking about my mess, like really honing in on my messaging. And, I could be creative about, maybe if I did want to explore another shiny object syndrome thing, I could, because it's completely systemized, and it's happening. It's just coming along.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that advice. I love finding your tribe. I think everybody should find their tribe out there somewhere for support. All right. So now you also had something that I thought was very interesting. You have a 3-step sales for success. You say you need a viral strategy, you need traffic, and you need a message. So I know that's a lot to kind of break down, but could you tap on that just briefly?
Yeah, for sure. So I talk about a viral strategy, and this is really just about being smart about how you incentivize people once you do get in front of your ideal client, ideal audience. How do you, and they love you, they're a raving fan, how do you actually incentivize them to share about you? And I'm not talking about affiliate marketing, I'm not talking about that, but it could just be literally, hey, share this with 3 of your friends and get this thing, right? It could be super simple like that. We also do a lot of viral contests and things to actually get new leads, and have them sharing. So there are a whole host of different ways that, you can actually plug virality into your, call it funnels, into your sales process, whatever, to actually get people sharing about you. And this is actually something that a lot of people don't think about, but it can be incredibly effective. So that's the first thing. The second thing is traffic. Traffic is like, again, without traffic, you don't really have a business, right?
Right.
So for me, the way I think about it is via like a traffic pyramid, and there are 4 tiers to that traffic pyramid. The first is passive organic marketing. Now, this is what we know as social media. It's content creation, it's getting yourself out there, and it's important because, again, you need it for credibility, you need it for authority, all of that. But it's kind of like, you're like kind of passive. You're passively sitting back waiting for people to come and stumble upon you. So what's the next thing then? It's really about leveraging other people's audiences, right? That's like getting onto podcasts like this, getting onto like leveraging bloggers, as in terms of like, can you guest blog for them? Find ways that you can work with other people, where you can get in front of their audience. And that's been something in the marketing strategy that's never going to go away, and is definitely going to continue being the future of marketing. The third tier is what I call what I spoke about, active organic marketing. And this is so important because, as I said, this is the way that you are going to actually be able to hone in on your ideal customer avatar. Because then when we scale into paid ads, which is the top of the pyramid, you won't find yourself wasting thousands and thousands of dollars, because you know exactly who you're talking to and you know how they're speaking themselves. So that's traffic. And I do that all the time. I go up and down that traffic pyramid constantly.
Right.
And then messaging is like the holy grail, and it's holy grail. And it's something that like we're constantly testing, because you might find that you have a message that hits, and then the world moves, the world changes, and then you have to do it all over again. So we actually have this thing called Messagelytics. It's a way to very quickly sprint test your messages using super cheap Facebook ads. So just a traffic campaign, $25, 2 days, to test what messages your ideal audience actually wants to hear about, or what they actually care about. So we actually, again, teach our clients how to do all of that as well. And we do that constantly, all the time.
Deirdre, this has been so helpful for me. I'm like, okay, I want that, I want to do that. So I'm really hoping this resonates with our audience, because I really think what you're doing is new in the market and is so helpful, especially to entrepreneurs who are just starting out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that, Sharon. I really appreciate it.
Okay, tell everybody how they can reach you.
Yes, so you can find me on all of the social media platforms, for example, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, just with my name, Deirdre Tshien. So that's DeirdreTshien. And I've got my website is www.deirdretshien.com.
Nice. Thank you so much for doing this. I love this episode. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on, Sharon.
All right, I am going to pause the recording. All right, everybody, that was Deirdre Tshien. Did she not have an amazing story? I was riveted. I was listening to every detail. It is a startup and they are still working out this software, but definitely go check it out. Thank you guys very much for tuning in and listening, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.